Hey there, this is John Chen, and it is actually really snowing here in Seattle. That's the amazing part. That we're this is, I guess, the first snowfall of the Seattle season. I think something between 2 and 8 inches is uh, supposed to be predicted for today. So I'm excited here, though. We're making good things happen here in Seattle, keeping warm and making all sorts of technology. All I got to do is turn on all my computers. And basically, that's like the equivalent of all the heaters that we need. Speaking of the heat, this gentleman I got a chance to meet through Liz Caruso. That's a shout out to Texie Talk, where both of us were keynoters on Texie Talk. This gentleman is a director of experience for the Social Media Examiner. In addition to that, he is a jazz saxophonist. Let's bring to the stage the one, the only, Phil Mershon. Phil,
Hey,
bravo.
thanks for having me on, John. Excited to be here. Let's do this.
Excited to be here. I'm so glad. One of the coolest ways I get a chance to meet people is like other speakers at other places. And when you see people that are cool, you're just like, hey, I just want to hang out and meet. And especially when you say, hey, look, I got an interview show. Let's just hang out and find out a little bit more about each other. Thank you so much, Phil. Phil, how long have you been playing?
We don't want to say, but I've been playing since about seventh grade. I'll just say that. I won't put a number of years on that.
Phil, you remind me of
So
the Zsa Zsa Gabor joke. Have you ever heard the Zsa Zsa Gabor joke?
I have not.
She's at a press release for her birthday, and somebody, a lady, is in there who's a reporter. Goes, Zsa Zsa, Zsa Zsa, I got a question. She goes, go, and she goes, Zsa Zsa, how old are you today? And she goes, well, how old are you? And she goes, I'm 41. And she goes, tip number one, don't ever tell them your age. Next question. So there you go,
That's
seventh grade.
awesome. Yeah, well, you could probably tell I'm probably over 41. That's all I'll say. I want as my grandfather told my grandmother when they were dating and she asked him how old he was, he said, I'll never see 40 again. Turns out he wouldn't see 50 or 60 again either, but that's a different story.
Oh.
So,
Well, good. Well, it's already holiday season here. I love you were just sharing in the pre-show that you've actually maybe heard the Peanuts holiday album more than enough times. You love music, but you probably too, like me, love to use music as part of creating experience. For our friends who don't know you, Phil, take a moment here, introduce yourself, and tell people who you are and what you do.
yeah, so like you said, John, I am Director of Experience for Social Media Examiner, and I've been part of our signature conference from the very first year. It's called Social Media Marketing World. But prior to that, we were doing online summits, so that's very pertinent to this conversation because we were doing online events back when they were not so common. In fact, our CEO got quoted in one of the very early books talking about how you do online events. And so I've been part of that since 2010. And prior to that, I was a worship pastor for a couple decades in different part-time and full-time roles. I've done some work for Koch Industries way back in the day, doing training and development, and worked for a nonprofit. So I've got very diverse skills and experience. Some call me a creative Swiss Army knife, and I own that because I like being creative. I like having a lot of different things that I'm doing, and I would say I've been doing events for most of my career, just didn't have that label until the last 15 years.
Okay, let's see. I'm
So
tempting trying to ask questions that nobody asked you. Out of all the tools on Swiss Army knives, and when I was a kid, didn't you love like the Swiss Army knives that had like 40 and 50
yes.
tools in there?
Oh yeah.
Out of all the tools on a Swiss Army knife, which one do you think you're most like?
Oh, that's a great question. Um, Gosh,
Choose
it's
a
not
Jeopardy.
one because I use all of them. So here's what I say about the Swiss Army knife is I can I can use quite a few of them for a short period of time, but the one that you'd probably want me to use the most is music, if that's like the main blade.
Hmm.
But it needs to be sharpened as well. So, but gosh, I don't know which one am I most like. Maybe it's the corkscrew. 'Cause it unlocks things. It's kind of squirrely, and it uncorks really cool things. But you got to work at it because that's not the easiest way to open a bottle of wine, right? And there's probably some truth in that about me. Sometimes I'm not the easiest to work with. So,
Well, I don't know if you're a wine aficionado, although my best guess is that you are. We recently got one of those motorized ones. You just put it on the top, push a button, and it does all the spiraling for you.
I don't know, man. That sounds like cheating.
It's you got to keep it on a charger. You're right. It is a little bit cheating. And the best part too is most of the time, like there are definitely times when it fails, right? Which is like it's supposed to be this amazing piece of technology, and like all technology, it still fails at some point. Um,
Yep.
well, thank you. I want to share on two items that you talked about that I did not know about you. 2010 live streaming. There are a good collection of people, especially in the events industry, they really have been doing this for a long time. And so when the pandemic hit, they were like, "We've been doing this," um,
Right.
and and I'd love to hear, what were some of the experiences and things that shaped you in 2010 when you were live streaming?
And I wouldn't say we were live streaming, but we were doing virtual events. So we weren't bringing video in because back in those days, video was not reliable. We tried, we tried doing stuff with video and we just didn't feel confident in its ability. But, those were the days when you had to pull in your audio from a separate source from your video screen. Like, so we did show slides, and we were using Microsoft products and other products and having to pull telephone in back in those days. So, it was the same kinds of challenges of how do you keep people engaged and focused in the conversation, but it wasn't nearly as hard as it is today because people didn't have as many things to look at. So, I think our challenge back in those days was speakers like they do now would be on the road somewhere and they would have an unreliable
Oh,
internet source
oh,
to get in.
oh.
And so I can't tell you how many times we've had to re-record sessions or apologize while a speaker had to call back in because they lost their internet connection. It doesn't feel like it happens as much now unless they're in another country and they're in a place where they thought they were going to have good internet and they get there and realize they don't and they scramble and they apologize and or they try it anyway. We've, over the years, we like I said, we've been doing this for 12, 13 years. I know there have been dozens of times when something like that has happened. It's like, well, that's not what we planned for in the tech call. You promised me this. It's not the way it was. And then you have to figure out how do you apologize to customers, and like we
Yep.
would do a 2 day, no questions asked refund policy. And it happened on the first 2 days with something like that. Then you're like, how do you promise it's not going to keep happening? Because the customer doesn't know. That's probably one of the biggest challenges back in those days.
Yeah, that's great that you go back to the time when you were just screen sharing. So all the data you collected was basically to compose in the image, and then you would be hearing a teleconference. You're using two different systems around that,
Yep.
and I don't know if you feel this way, right? Because I thought for sure that the internet was going to melt down during the pandemic because I did not think that the infrastructure was ready for 10 times as many people to be on online, and it's been pretty decent. I mean, there's been a couple meltdowns, but nothing to the catastrophe that I thought. Like in the early days, I guess I was at Microsoft for a decade. In the early days, when we had either video or there was like some big email thing that was happening, like it would crush the internet, the version of internet that was on the Microsoft campus at a time when we were all trying to
Mm.
push too much data. And I think that's what was happening with the early pioneers too, right? I don't know if you feel
Oh,
that way
yeah, for
too.
sure. Yeah, no, for sure. I think during the pandemic, I didn't notice it a lot. There were those days when Zoom would have a blackout because there's way too many people were trying to be on there and it wasn't what they expected and they
Yep.
had to adapt. But I think we were all patient during those first couple of months because we were all learning something. What was really fun for me, and I think you probably were experiencing this too, is like, watching within 3 months of the pandemic, all these people starting to come out as digital event experts. And I'm
Yeah.
I've been doing this a really long time, and yeah, maybe I'm not using all the newfangled tools, and maybe there's some of these new things that people are doing that are working, but they were like, yeah, I took a course, I'm an expert now. And they're trying to actually, would have people trying to work with us. And we just were internally saying, you realize we've been doing this since before this was popular, we were planning to stop doing it. We were actually not going to do online events anymore because we saw everybody doing them for free, and we're like, we got to make money. We're a company that makes money by providing education, and so we were going to move away from it. And then this pandemic comes along, and we're like, well, okay, well, I guess we're back in it for a while.
Yeah, I think one of the worst examples of this was like to become a certified presenter on one of the pieces. It was literally a test. Like it was like it felt like a Google form. Like if you checked enough of the box, 60 to 70% of the boxes, right? Bam, you are certified virtual presenter. I'm like, what? They didn't even like check you. They didn't even live check you. Today we do thousands of checks for speakers on mics, cameras, lighting, and everything. And I got to tell you, we're still giving feedback a lot of the time for people on those, and so I have no idea. That's a great piece, though, Phil, for anybody who is buying right producers or services for their virtual meetings. Really go look at their history because if they really have been doing it a decade, they paid for and got all the lessons long time ago that they will work super hard so that they will not happen on your event. The rest of the people
Yeah.
had to figure it out. They all learned by fire, right?
Yeah. And stuff still happens. You had it happen right before this event. You had a mic go out. Things
Oh yeah.
happen, but you were ready for it. You've experienced it. You know what's going on. And I think that's the difference with those who are brand new in it versus those who've been doing it a long time. We are much faster to respond and it doesn't stress us out.
Well, I want to hit one more thing in your past before we continue on the things that you're doing now. You said you're a worship pastor, and I know a lot of worship pastors really know production because
Mm.
they were either video live streaming or just in house making a production every Sunday. And so they got 52 shots at it a year and they got really good at it. And I know that a lot of houses of worship have probably some of the more advanced equipment because again they're doing it so much and that they invested in it. So I'm just kind of curious how your experience as a worship pastor influenced you into the experiences that you make.
Yeah, so in the day when I was doing it, the online streaming stuff was not common, or it wasn't in the churches where I was. So that, the larger churches were doing that for a long time, like Life Church, which is right across the street from me. Out this window, I can look at them. One of their campuses, they've been doing it since they're, like 2005, one of the earliest. But the churches I served didn't. But I'd still say the way that it helps me is I've been thinking about a minute by minute order of a program since the 90s. Like that's just the way my mind works. I programmed in Excel spreadsheets back for Boeing Military Air back when, in the very early days of what you guys were doing at Microsoft. And so, my mind just works in spreadsheets and timelines. And so
Hmm.
that's part of how I approach being a producer. But then there's the creative side. Like I don't start there. I start with a blank piece of paper when I'm putting together a program and I start thinking about the experiences and what do I want people walking away with and what are the different pieces that are going to fit together. It might be stickies on a white wall, on the wall, and then I'm bringing it together into what's the story and then how does that work down into the minute by minute. And that's the way I would approach planning a worship service or a retreat or a conference or take it down to a meeting. I know that's part of your audience here is here just for like how do I do a really engaging virtual meeting. You do the same thing. You don't just say we're going to have an hour meeting and here's the one agenda item. You need to actually break it down into what are the segments of this. How are we going to make this interesting and move forward? You may not have the full plan, but you're still breaking it down into where do we want to be at the end? What are the big chunks that we want to see accomplished? Who's managing what and how are we guiding the time, use of time. That's going to make for a better meeting for everybody, or they're going to be frustrated, right?
Yeah, that's the key. What I've told people is to maximize that 1 hour meeting starts with way before the meeting. And if you're the host or or own a segment of that meeting, is really thinking about what do you want to do at that time. And I think if it's amazing what you can do with it when you're much more intentional around it. But there's so many people who just wing it, right? You got to set goals. So by the way, I got to shout out for our friend Deborah. Deborah Eckerling is online and saying
Hey, hi,
hello. My
Deborah.
worlds collide. Hi, friends. And
That's
also
awesome.
Diana is also here. And I don't know if you have any stories to share about like well-designed meetings or disaster meetings in the past 2 years, Phil. So again, I know your goal is really to create experiences. I would love to talk about it in this meeting sense, and I'd love to talk about it, for the larger sense, which is more like conferences or other types of things like that.
I can't help but tell a story from earlier in my career first, which isn't in the
Okay.
last 2 years, that, went into this meeting with a top executive in at Koch Industries, and we had a really clear agenda of what we wanted to do. And within the first 5 minutes, he comes in and rips it up because we're asking the wrong question. So that's always fun. You can't plan for that, and you kind of want to anticipate it. But I'd say within the last 2 years, the worst meetings that I go to are the ones where, we've done preparation in advance. So it's not a terrible meeting. Everybody's done their preparation in advance. They've turned in slides, and we've got, a 50 or 60 slide deck for a 60 to 90-minute meeting. But then there's no conversation. It's one person at a time for 60 minutes. And
Oh,
the expectation is that you're fully engaged and listening to every minute. And I'm the kind of person where I need it to be interactive. I need to be able to ask questions. I need to participate. It feels like if you're going to have a meeting, that meeting could have been a slide deck and a recording that we made, and we could watch it at our own time as
yes.
information. But then let's say let's get together and let's talk about topics X, Y, and Z. And so the best meetings have been collaborative. And I had one yesterday, which was only two people, but I've had a version of it that was four people recently, where we came in and we said, this is what we want to try to accomplish. And we started with an idea. And for an hour, you're just brainstorming back and forth and say, well, what about this? Is there anything like that? And you're literally
Yeah.
creating in the moment. And I think the best meetings bring both of those together. Yeah, sometimes you need to instill information or cast vision, but then you also need that place where we can solve together, we can share ideas, sharpen each other, make it better. And I think literally this meeting yesterday, I walked in thinking, is this idea even workable? And I'm working with a top level songwriter out of Nashville, trying to write a song for our
Wow.
conference. And I'm walking into it saying, is this possible? Walked out saying, I think we've got the nugget of a song that could, be a top 40 type song. And that's not our goal. Our goal is to serve the event, but it would be really cool. And so that kind of transformation can happen when you've got a really well designed meeting with the right people in the meeting.
That's what I love that. I have two core beliefs. One of them is that this meeting's different because you're on it.
Mm,
Right? Really, like so, and so your input, anybody who's in that meeting, it needs to be, if they have that opportunity to give their input, then they can change the course of this meeting, and that's why you should have it. I mean, if you're just presenting information and you don't want anybody to comment, right? Send me the video. Do us all the favor. Don't burn these precious online minutes that way. But I do love that, since you said jazz too, is that great virtual meetings are like jazz. And what I mean by that is that nobody knows what the end song is like, but people are responding to the notes that say you play by playing new notes and going back and forth. And I mean, that's the true brainstorming as well as collaboration, as well as, you're trying to have it be better than just one person saying, this is the thing we're going to do, and we're going to do it this way. Everyone coming back saying, this is the overall goal, but what experiences, what things do you have to bring to that? And that's when people go, I know a person, right? I have this graphic, these are the types of things that we could put inside of there. So, anyways, I think it's a little bit like jazz. I don't know if you probably akin that metaphor somewhere for great virtual meetings.
I've not done it for virtual meetings, but I think you're absolutely right. You've been doing it in this call. You told me we had three questions that we were going to tackle, and we haven't even done any of them yet. Well, I suppose we've kind of been doing number one,
Yeah,
but you have been like riffing. You've been taking something that I've said, and then you're riffing on it and pushing it back. And that's what great jazz musicians do. Like, I love being able to play with a drummer who I can go back and forth with them. Like, I can play off the rhythms that they're playing, or a guitar player, like we're trading riffs back and forth. And there's this synergy that can happen. And I think in a good meeting, that does happen. Like, everyone knows, okay, we're going to play. I just was playing God Rest Ye Merry Gentlemen, very common Christmas carol
yeah,
that's played this time of year. So we might all go in and say, we know that song, we know what key, we establish, okay, what tempo, what kind of groove. But then once you start, you're right. You don't know what it's going to end like. You might like make a 7-minute version of it. You might make a 2-minute version. It might go places you just didn't expect, like you digging into Swiss Army knives. I mean, come on, no one's ever asked that question before. But that's where things can go. And sometimes the best ideas come because you decided to allow space for that. And, traditional music in a concert where we're reading the pages, just note by note, page by page,
yeah,
those moments don't happen. It's more, then it's the interpretation of the page, which isn't a bad meeting,
yeah,
but I think the engaging meetings allow everyone to have a voice. Everyone can jump in.
yeah,
Everyone gets their time. Like jazz musicians know, not everyone is soloing at every moment. Not everyone's leading at every moment. Everyone kind of knows what their part is.
and you shouldn't play a 20-minute solo unless you were watching School of Rock, right? um,
Yeah, that probably doesn't go very far.
let me ask this. Speaking of people who are riffing, right? One of my kids introduced me to Postmodern Jukebox. Do you know who they are?
I have heard of them, yes.
Postmodern Jukebox, the guy was great. He graduated with a PhD in like ragtime piano or some classical music or something like that. And then he suddenly realized there are no jobs for
Mhm.
PhDs. So he started taking modern songs and setting them to like ragtime styles and beats and piano riffs. And
Okay.
he now hit like a billion views on YouTube. And he's touring with like a 16-piece band, which I got to see in my son's college town of Troy, New York. And that's a great example of taking something that's new and actually making it old, which made it new again, which was great. Right.
Oh, that's awesome. I guess I didn't know the full story. I just heard the name. Haven't really dug into what he's doing. So that's
Oh,
awesome.
yeah, definitely dig in. You can watch a whole YouTube series and you'll be amazed. I think you'll be really impressed with the musicians they bring out. All right, let's see if we can get Pseudo back on track. Um, for Phil, so Phil designs experiences. What has to happen for you for let's go to the other side too. Let's go out of meetings now. Let's go to like conferences and like bigger events is something that you really specialize in. What has to happen for you at that let's say a virtual conference or a hybrid conference um, for it to be engaging for you? So,
A couple things. You've got to make it relevant for me pretty quick. It needs to feel like, okay, I belong here, like you said, but also this is something that I need. So, let's go back to Liz's event a couple weeks ago. She did a great job with Ramon kicking the event off of setting the stage of why this is important for everybody who's gathered here. And I think if you do that at the beginning, you create a hook for me of why I should be here. So that's one, create that relevance for me where I'm able to take whatever's going on in my world and realize, okay, I need to be here. I think there's a this is important for me. I don't know if it's important for everyone or for you, John, but I think there needs to be a call to action of saying, "Hey, give this a chance."
ooh,
Like you're here for a reason. So give this event a chance. I think it could actually be really meaningful for you, but you need to give us your attention, give us a chance, and invite me in and invite me to lay aside my phone or wherever I am multitasking and say, you know what, you're going to get more out of this if you engage with us. And my promise to you is this: look, if it's not adding value, go ahead and leave, but give it a chance. You're not going to get the full value if you don't. But here's a couple ways, and I think you talk about some ways that that becomes important. And I think the community. So you've got people chatting with you right now, and some people like to chat, some people don't. Some people find that an incredible distraction. And so, hey, you know what? If chat's not your thing, here's how to hide it. So you can be fully present with us here. That's going to pull you out of this. But for other people, that's actually a way for them. And for me, I like to be able to chat because it allows some of those left field ideas to pull in. So community is a really big part of virtual events for me. I don't go just for the content because I could go listen to a podcast or watch a YouTube video. I came to an event because I'm going to meet someone like you, and so I showed up to several of the things that Liz did where it was more community based because I didn't come just to deliver a keynote. I like doing that. That's fun. And I hope someone walked away with something that's going to help them. But I am more interested in what are the new relationships and what are the things that are going to come out of those conversations. So if an event doesn't do a good job of providing space for conversations, I'm not nearly as interested in it.
I'd love to hear, since you've gotten a chance to work on a lot of programs, I would love to hear what you felt like with the best program you got a chance to work on in the last 2 years. Here, I'll give you an example. I got a chance to work on Training Magazine's conference, and it was a 1,200 person virtual, and they asked me to be the lead producer, which I was incredibly honored. And what I was really excited about, this was the one conference where they kind of took off any handcuffs and let me run the conference in a way that I thought was going to be most engaging. And we taught everybody 6 key principles. Everybody who was in it already agreed to them. They were already kind of presenting or training in that style. And it just turned out to be a huge success. We just got feedback after feedback of people saying this is the most engaging virtual conference that I've ever been on. And the side note was it was the only 100% live conference in the training industry. Everybody else cheated by using a pre-recorded video somewhere in the program, and we were like, why do that? And I actually
Yeah.
thought I took that as a badge of honor. Someone gave one last quote, and he said, a gentleman whose name is Bob Pike. He is a industry legend in the training field. His training group has grown, and he sold it to his daughter. Um, and he said, 100% live virtual conference is a massive risk. Dot dot dot. And then he goes, unless you have the right team.
Yeah. Oh, it is definitely.
Yeah,
Yeah. And
so
something's
that's one of
likely to
mine.
go wrong.
I'd love to
Yeah. I
hear
think for
yours.
me, yeah, I haven't been probably as part of as many as you have in the last 2 years, but there's one that we did in 21, in March of 21. We called the social media marketing workshops. And we saw everybody going online and doing the traditional summits, 50 sessions a day for 3 days, or, I'm being facetious, but you know what I'm talking about. And we are like, we're not doing that. So if they're zigging, let's zag. So let's do something where we're going deeper. So what we did is we created a 2 week event, 4 days a week. Each session was 2 hours, but every session went for 2.5 hours because people stuck around and kept asking questions and kept asking, and they would have kept going if we hadn't turned it off. So I think what was so cool about that is we had the opportunity there to give speakers the space to go deep into their topic, to do it in a way that made sense to them, to break their topic up into chunks, and then do consistent check-ins. So like they were doing a great job of making sure they were monitoring what the audience was, asking about, and answering questions as they went when it made sense. And then we also threw some virtual parties, and people loved it. Like they did come for some networking. Most people didn't. Like I think by March of 21, they were kind of tired of anything that was on Zoom that they didn't have to be on, but they still did. They still showed up, and they were ready to have some fun together. So to me, it was fun because it took this theory of, what, if we give the speaker the chance to go deep and give them the chance to answer people's questions, people are going to love it. And they did. The feedback was the best of any event we've ever done. And so it was, for me, I also got a chance to really be much more active. I actually had to pull my sacks out a couple times. We had one speaker who their internet went out 3 times during her talk. So I became the entertainment during those breaks and people were saying, "Hey, Phil, bring out the sax." And the first time it happened, like, no, that's not, this isn't the right place. By the end of the event, I was like, oh, I should just be ready to do this whenever. Like I've got it sitting out, ready to go whenever, you and I did it pre-show. I wasn't quite ready for that, but it was, it didn't take me long, did it? So that was a fun one.
I love the format of that, and I think there is a trend inside of, especially like 2021, now we're 2022, which is go deeper, right?
Yeah.
Going deeper is definitely what people want, because if you can really get them interested, obviously and most of the time in the first 10 minutes, an attendee's going to know whether or not they're interested in the speaker and this topic. And then if they really are interested in the speaker and the topic, then they're like, we want to know how you did that, right? Whatever that
Yeah.
thing is. If you have a secret, get more views, especially in social media too. Everyone's got a secret of the thing that they're doing. And if I haven't tried it and I haven't heard about it, I'm interested in it. The things like I actually learned at a social media conference that at least Facebook groups when they first came out, or when I started my group, still had 100% read rate, right? Everything else was getting filtered, like your feed was getting filtered hardcore, but a group. This is why groups became so popular in Facebook.
Right.
Is that members of the group, if they volunteered or voluntarily chose, then that you could actually get your messaging out, and so it turned into something really valuable. Let me just check into this format. So basically, I think you widened it out. So you went 2 weeks, like what, 5 days, Monday through Friday ish.
Monday through Thursday, 2 weeks. So, 8 days total, a morning session and an afternoon session that was scheduled for 2 hours, but we allowed it to go longer with Q&A, took a break, so I forget the exact timing. Let's say it was 10 to 12 and then 2 to 4. I don't remember for sure, but there was a long enough break in between that we could take a break and get back ready, with any pre-show tech and all that kind of stuff, and then did it again. And we did. We only did. I think we did 14 total, but one speaker had to back out due to health concerns, so it ended up being 13. So, but it was great, and we would have done it again this year, but we had some other things going on. But we're considering it again already for next year. So it's I think it's a kind of format that could work for a lot of people.
I love it. I'd be interested in trying it. That's I'm actually designing my next conference right now, and one of the things is I took Skift, Skift, put out a report, and they were able to crank all the grind all the data from virtual summits, and something they came back with, which actually my data didn't correlate with, was said that Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday is the most attended days, right? And Thursday's not that good, and Friday apparently is like a terrible virtual day, which most people agree with. But it was weird in my conference. I actually got more engagement on Friday and not less. So maybe I should go back and look at it. But I did change my conference next year to be Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, and so I'm going to shorten the days and maybe do. I like the morning segment, a break, and an afternoon segment. I think by putting that hour in between for people to eat or do whatever it is that they want during that hour session buys you the time and the energy to like have a pretty in-depth session. Um, but I have not thought
I
about
was
this, like doing a 2 hour segment in the morning and a 2 hour in the afternoon. I think that's a really great idea, because I'd be curious if my speakers had 2 hours, what would they do? Because right now they kind of have 45 minutes, and then there's a crossover time between the next speaker, and where there's some Q&A and some other things that happen around that. But 45 minutes is actually pretty short. So I don't know. I'm really curious
It
about.
depends on your speaker. In my
Yeah.
experience, some of the speakers who are used to doing half day and full day workshops had zero issue with this. They're like,
Yep.
oh, I can do this in my sleep. The people who a 45-minute presentation is already scary, yeah, that's a long time. And there's ways to break it up. And we would coach them and work with them. A couple of them, came in way short,
Yeah.
and we had a good time for Q&A, and a couple of them didn't go the full 2 hours, I want to say, but most of them went 2.5, like by the time they were done answering Q&A. But we get them to chunk it into 3 or 4 sections. Like
Yeah.
we coached them in this, and then said, you need to take a break in the middle of it. Let's take a 5-minute break. Most people don't like going for 2 hours straight. You're you're going to lose their focus at some point. So,
Right.
so take a 5 minute break in the middle, or if you do 4 sections, just give them 5 minutes to do a project. So like that's a big lesson was give them something to do so
Yes.
that they're walking away having already tried the skill. Like go try creating a reel and come back and I'm going to take somebody's on and we're going to look at what they did. And then I'm going to give you some pointers. And then we're going to, next time you're going to create one and I'll bring somebody else on. And, that's just an example. Like to me, workshop is you're working, you're trying something. You're not
Yes.
just listening to content for 2 hours. You're actually going to walk away having tried something and feel like, okay, I get it sort of. And now I think I know how to at least get started. And
Phil,
most of them even created like a handout, like something that would walk them through it. And
a
they loved
guide.
it.
Yeah. Take them on a journey. Phil, have you ever used the morph transition in PowerPoint?
I have not.
So this was
What is
something that
that?
was shown to us at a presentation summit, and one of the presenters, who's very experienced, we kind of brushed over it, and all that there was a collection of beginners who were all in the audience, and I was the virtual MC for this conference. So they came in and they're like, so somebody came back and said, "Hey, can somebody just go back and share what morph is?" And so I slowed it down and worked with somebody. I made somebody else do it. I said, "Show me your PowerPoint, share it your screen. I'll show you how to do it." And the conference organizer loved it. He cut it back up again, showing the advanced session paired with like our impromptu like how to session, and people immediately got it. And then they saw um, how to apply this. How can you apply this thing, which most of the top designers are doing. Speaking of top designers, what I'd love to hear now is what do you see coming up on the horizon or, in the future? What do you think? I love that you said go deeper. I'm kind of curious, what do you think is going to happen to virtual in the next 1 to 5 years?
Hmm. It's not going anywhere, even though we all have grown to just kind of accept it and maybe even, um, a little bit with resistance, but it's not going anywhere. And I think it's going to get better at understanding its place in the ecosystem. Like, I think people are going to be more discerning on when do I need to travel and when can I do this virtually? And that's going to be different. We are already seeing it, and I think you probably are too, that people aren't as willing to travel for events now. The why has to be stronger because of finances, but also just the opportunity cost of time. So I think virtual has to get better at delivering content, but also building community. And I think that's going to be stuff that we're all going to be figuring out. And to me, it's less about tech. Like all the companies coming out with new tech, doing the cool bells and whistles. And there's some things that are really good to have in there, engagement tools and even abilities to do surveys and real time polls and all those things I think are valuable. But to me, it's the designer, it's you and me and the people on this call who are producing the shows who have to get smarter at how do we create the human experience. And that's just, we've got to do it. It's a different stage. And by stage, I mean like we're stepping onto a different kind of stage to present. We've got to understand all the dynamics of how do we create a great experience on this kind of stage at this place in the world. I don't know, things like VR and all that's probably going to start coming into play as we get further and further into this.
Yeah.
I don't think that's like a near term. We all need to start going and buying our goggles and figuring this out by next year. I think that's probably a 5 year. I'm not a technologist or a futurist, but I would say it's 5 years away at least before it becomes more commonplace. But if you're in a industry, you probably are doing it already or need to be. Those are just a couple of thoughts.
I see those two lanes right now. There's such a big trend right now where people want to improve their virtual meeting with no additional tech. They are burned
Hmm.
out. They do not. They're already like having a hard enough time getting their current mic and their current camera and lighting whatever to work, right? And then there's this other side where I just recently experimented with this too. Is that this tech can really make your program more engaging if you do it in the right way.
Hmm. Hmm.
And I think that, things like that are going to start showing up. And I think some of the tech has to be so easy, like the attendees don't have to do anything, right? But maybe you as the presenter or you, the producer, are do all the tech and you present it in such a way that the attendee doesn't have to do anything except either sit back and then decide how they're going to engage, right?
Yeah. I just remembered one of the things I've seen people do in the last 2 years, and this is an event I went to, not one that I produced, and I think this continues to be true, a best practice is if you've got the budget, you need to put stuff in the mail to virtual event attendees.
Yes.
Meetings, no. But virtual event attendees, if you can get them a box of stuff that's going to keep them engaged, like maybe even stuff that they're going to open throughout the event. Um, and then the other thing I've seen done super well is getting people to bring stuff that's in their personal environment. Like I'm sitting here, I've got a shaker. If you could get me engaging with stuff that's around me, bringing my world into this virtual world. Yeah, there you go. There's some examples of things that you can put in a box. I think the more you do that, the more engaging it becomes because now all of a sudden you've engaged more of my senses. Like the more senses you can engage, because right now we're only
Yes.
engaging two, sight and sound. But if you can engage my tactile by creating some music and you're getting me kinesthetically involved, and then you're getting maybe you've sent me something that I can open and I can eat and taste and smell. Now all of a sudden you brought it all together in a way that can be powerful if it's on purpose,
Yeah,
done in a
this kid
gimmicky
actually
way.
does that, which is, and now I'm going back. I think I might want to go back and the next year fully integrate every single element inside of here. One of them is actually a Warheads candy, and my good friend Sardik Love, who's a trainer, used it. Everybody eats the camera at the candy at the same time on camera. Right. And
Nice.
it's like it starts out super sour, and you get to see like the number of people who, that you get an immediate reaction to it. But then we have
Yeah.
whiteboards and all these other types of things. In fact, we also worked with our good friend Jimbo Clark, and he physically shipped a box. So like he's asked people have asked him to do an out of the box program, and he said, "What if I actually put a real box on your head?" And now he's got like over 100 facilitators around the world who teach this, and he's called it Fidgetal. So if you want to,
Mhm.
borrow a word, he coined the term phygital, which is the use of physical objects to make virtual better.
Oh, phygital, like PHY,
Yeah,
digital.
like let's get
I
phygital.
love it, man. Let's get phygital. No fidgeting allowed, though.
Well, I just
That's awesome.
look, I have a fidget toy already here too, right?
There you go. There you
um,
go.
Phil, if people want to find you, where do they go to find you?
I'd say send them to LinkedIn. I think you've got my LinkedIn handle is probably the best. I'm on Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook. My website is in development. I've got a book coming out next year called Unforgettable, and so that's going to be coming out next September in all the bookstores. But I'll have author copies available sometime in the late spring, or actually early spring. So yeah, that'll be all out there. So that'd be great.
Congratulations. Thanks again, Phil. And if people only remembered one thing from this interview, what's your one thing that you want people to remember?
Be unforgettable. Do
Genius. And
something that's unforgettable in your events or in your meetings, something that's going to make it stand out, something that, think about what's going to make this meeting memorable for the people who are here and create that experience on purpose. It doesn't have to be like the best event they ever had. I think to the point we've talked about, if you make it personal and relevant and really welcome people into it, it will become that because they're going to co-create with you.
Genius. Phil, thanks again. Thanks for playing your sax with us and sharing experiences that range all the way back from 2010 online experiences and more all the way here. Thanks again, Phil. I look forward to seeing you soon.
All right. Thanks. Thanks to everyone who watched.
All right. Hey, this is John Chen. Happy holidays to all of you. That was an interview with Phil Mershon. Oh, my geez. I'm going to do it wrong now. Hold on. I got my crib sheet wrong. Mershon. I'm going to get it right. Okay, great. Thank you. That's Phil. And again, I met Phil at Liz Caruso's Techsy Talk. Make sure and check his stuff out. His link is inside of there if you want to know more about creating engaging experiences. All right. We'll see you next time. Happy holidays. See you soon.
Always start people and keep old people. Show you